Then the rains came to Madna. There had been a heaviness in the air for a few days. The electricity had gone off often. It always does before the rains, Vasant had said wisely. He had sky watched in the morning and announced oracularly, "It will rain today." One more hot afternoon, Augustia was naked in bed, lazily wondering if he had sunstroke. Suddenly a roar and a drum roll, as of a distant war. He took a few seconds to place the sound. Then he was off the bed and fumbling with a lungi and kurta and not being able to tie the lungi and getting his head and arms stuck in the kurta because of his haste. He rushed out. Outside there was nothing but rain. The world turned monochromatic as the skies exploded. Cloud, building, tree, road, they all diffused into one blurred shade of slate. In minutes the gravel turned muddy, then bubbly. Vasant's children came racing round the corner, shrieking their ecstasy, naked and free. They writhed in the mud, gurgled, ran, shrieked, danced, infecting all those who saw them. The rhapsodizers were right, thought Augustia. There was something uplifting about the monsoon, and I don't mean the saris. Ha ha, as Vasant's wife, prematurely haggard with childbearing, came out to discourage her children. She had unexpectedly slim ankles and calves. In the room, the wooden ceiling began to leak at the corner every 14 seconds, an unsettling plop in the orange wastebasket. After a while, Augustia found himself waiting for the next plop. He went out again. Madna was washed, the green on the trees was new. No dust. It gave one the illusion that one's eyesight had improved. The rain had turned gentle and soothing. He opened his umbrella and went for a walk. His canvas shoes turned muddy in a dozen steps. Some very unexpected women had wonderful ankles and calves, slim and blossoming up towards the knees. He remembered Vasant's wife. Mrs. Shrivastov, he felt, would have stumps. The air of Madness smelt new, no excrement and exhaust smoke. Stepping carefully, he took 15 minutes to reach the rail tracks. He wouldn't walk on those. People sat there all the time. He waited by the side of the level crossing and watched the trucks pass. The orange of the weekend sun glowed on the puddles, reminding him of a painting. He watched the rain pierce and attenuate the puffs of black exhaust smoke. Whoever notices me, he thought, must think me insane, standing by a level crossing in the rain. Suddenly, the crossing was down. The trucks began to queue. The drivers emerged for a piddle and a smoke, retying their lungis, scratching their thighs, turning their faces up to the rain. He wondered, would the train be Madras to Delhi or Hyderabad to Calcutta? If to Calcutta, he suddenly decided, then Jagadamba will be right. Dadru a good omen. I'll be happy. And if to Delhi, I shall be, well, just generally fucked. He paused and added a postscript, for the rest of my life. He waited for minutes, smiling with the sudden tension. It was a good train, slow and heavy, with a few loafers at the mouths of the empty bogies. The wheels were monstrous and wonderful, each one a killer. People were flopping down under them all the time. It would be a really quick way to go. But it was nice watching trains pass as he moved down the tracks a little to pick some wild cannabis, yet somehow unsettling too. The trains made him feel that the world was large and that it was moving, but without him. There were two tracks. One curved round the garages and seemed to disappear into the pan shop next to the church. That went to the thermal power station. The other one was really straight. It looked very businesslike, and at its end seemed to touch the edge of the sky. Then he realized that he had seen these tracks from the bridge on that hot afternoon with Sati. He looked away at the bridge in the distance, with its struggling toy cars and trucks and patient pedestrians. He felt strange, without reason, at these linkages in perspective. I was there, looking here, and now it is the opposite. This thought made him feel odd. He began walking back, intermittently shifting his umbrella to feel the drops on his head. He moved off the road for the trucks. A wonderfully pretty tribal woman passed, tall and rigid. They exist, he shrieked silently, outside arty films about tribal exploitation and agrarian reform. They exist. She had large cracked feet and veined forearms. He wished that women were like this instead of being soft, white-thighed and demanding of tenderness after coitus, and smiled wickedly at his adjectival phrases. He stopped, waited for the tribal's whiff. There was just a hint of sweat and tobacco. From a distance he saw Bhatia turning in at the rest house. He waved. Bhatia stopped. Shiv was walking towards him with a woman. She turned out to be Shankar's wife, middle-aged and shabby, with lips that wouldn't fully hide her canines. She looked predatory. "Lovely rain," said Agastya. Shiv winked in reply. "Hello, Mandy. Great rain." "Yes, this place has at least cooled. But now the mosquitoes will really come out. I tried to get you on the phone, but I think the lines are down." They began walking away from the rest house. "There's this other assistant conservator of Forest I'm quite friendly with, called Gandhi. Did I ever tell you about him? He asked us to have tea with him. You too. He's heard about you and would like to meet you. A nice guy, simple, from Alwar. His wife's really sexy, too rural though. Wish I could fuck her." "What do bachelors do for sex in Madna, Mandy, apart from masturbating like adolescents?" "I asked Sati that once." He laughed as usual and said, "Why do you think I go so often to Hyderabad? You know, I think Gandhi's a very nice guy, but I wouldn't have dreamed of being friends with him in Delhi. I would have said, small towner." The remark irritated Agastya. He wanted absurdly to defend a city. "That's hardly the fault of Delhi. You and I weren't friends either in college." He looked at Bhatia with dislike. He was wearing another t-shirt. It said, "Herpes is forever." Again, that unsettling feeling that Bhatia was a funny mirror image of himself. "I don't want to go through life moving from place to place just making acquaintances. After a certain age, I don't think anyone can make new friends. If you're in a job like mine, you just stay away from old friends for long. They live a life you think you want to live, and when you next meet, everything is the same, only on the surface, because you don't talk about the things that really matter. Communication is impossible and pointless, because you have to part again." Just what is happening to him? Wondered Agastya. They reached the gates of the forest colony. "I just want to show you something," said Bhatia and took Agastya to the drain beside the road. There was a big light yellow turd half submerged in some green slime. "You wanted to show me this?" "Look, I've been a year here in Madna, and whenever I've crossed this place, I have found shit in this green muck. I pass this place almost 4 times a day, okay? And there's always a turd or two, as though this green scum wasn't filthy enough by itself. Someone shits in this mess regularly. I can't understand it. Why can't he shit in a field or something? It's got so bad that whenever I pass this place, I just have to check and see. Maybe he hasn't shat today. But I'm always wrong. I'm going to photograph this one day and send it for a New York card. Greetings from Madna. And I shall come here one morning and catch the shitter and ask him why he's doing this to me. Well, I've got a frog in my room. He came one of those nights when I was ill and he decided to stay." "Oh, frogs are okay." They entered the forest colony, Agastya wondering again why frogs were okay. "Mandy, your forest colony is nice. The forest department had been in Madna long before the factories had invaded the district and wiped out vast chunks of what the department was supposed to protect. It was a universal story. The foresters, as they were half contemptuously called by the revenue men, had built themselves a colony amid trees and hyena gangs, even the occasional tiger. That was a mere few decades ago. Madness landscape was changing fast. The colony was a great expanse demarcated by barbed wire that had long since decayed or been stolen, with once pretty gates of bamboo that now showed that no one cared. These gates must have been lovely, said Augustia. Now both were off their hinges and had been propped against the posts. The bamboo had decayed and broken. Like your gazetteer, said Batia. Government stuff, so made for neglect. The drive was long and winding. The rains had given it a seductive, romantic air. It looked like the walk for a couple whose relationship would never sour. Single-story houses with false ceilings that ensured coolness and lots of living space for rats, and as many trees as the earth would allow. It didn't look like a forest, for human hands had done the planting, but the trees still attracted monkeys and urchins who stoned them, and the occasional fox who was a useful ally to the mothers who wanted to deter their children from exploring after sundown. Mandy, this really is a nice place. It's so quiet and different from the rest of the town. Must be a wonderful place for these kids to play around in. One boy ran up to them, sturdy and sweaty. Batia, uncle. Shalou says there's a snake under that tree. Don't go near it, said Batia. They're planning a picnic for next Sunday. Everyone's going. Shrivstaff uncle and Kumar uncle also. The boy ran off to join his equally sweaty friends under a tree. My boss's son, said Batia. It's disgusting, his energy. He runs around outside even on May afternoons. Just runs around pointlessly. The sun emerged, meek and beaten, but the world shone. Isn't it amazing what weather can do to your mind? Said Agastya. Was Sati joking when he said he goes for his fucks to Hyderabad? Probably not. He can't go to the horrors of Madna because it'd soon be all over town. And they'd probably be as sexy as those horrors some of us used to go to from hostel. Remember? About us turning on as trying to get a job. And we can't go whoring here anyway. We'll probably meet a range forest officer or Naib Tehsildar tying up his pants. Then they'll know you're hungry and will provide you tribal women and booze when you go out on tour. That didn't sound bad at all to Agastya. It's sick, continued Bhatia. They do it for some officers on tour, but these officers are debauchees and just don't care about their reputation or their job. Agastya thought fleetingly of Shankar. If they're posted reasonably far from their bosses and their families, they even keep a tribal woman at home for sex and scrubbing the floors. That's the rest house. I share a suite of 2 rooms with Gandhi and his wife. Accommodation is one big problem in the colony. They turned towards the forest rest house. Bhatia said, "Good evening, sir," to a passerby, then asked, "August, I've been meaning to ask you. Sati told me your mother was Goanese. I didn't know that in college." "Well, my mother wore saris and ate fish like a Bengali," said Agastya lightly. He had no desire to reveal anything of himself to Bhatia. "My parents were married for about 17 years, long enough for my father to really colonize her. I was born very late. His aunt had been triumphant, his father had said, when his mother had not conceived. This is what comes of trying to mix Goanese and Bengali blood. I hardly remember my mother." He smiled to deprive his reminiscences of any hint of sorrow. "In my blood runs a little Feni, or something like that, but that's about all." Bhatia kept quiet. He looked a little embarrassed. Gandhi was quiet and stocky, self-possessed. Agastya liked him on sight. He had large, peaceful eyes, much easier to respond to than Bhatia's, which were yellow-filmed and restless. His full name turned out to be Mohandas Gandhi. "Now, why does that name sound familiar?" smiled Agastya. "It's very embarrassing. I have an elder sister. My parents named her Indira. They do not care for confusing families and generations." They laughed. Agastya smiled when he met Gandhi's wife, Rohini, for Batia's description of her came back to him. It had been very accurate. They sat in the veranda of the two-room cottage and watched the children play in the mud and their promenading mothers shriek their disapproval. A breeze began, tentatively. I would never have believed that Madna could have a place as nice as this forest colony. Augustia stopped then, out of an obscure sense of shame. Somehow it seemed a terrible, graceless thing to say. Over the months, shame was to recur often, in the oddest circumstances, and for all kinds of reasons. I must thank you, Mohan, for inviting me. Please don't mention it. We would have met earlier, but my wife hasn't been well. Mohan's wife also dropped a disciple at my wife. Augustia was distracted for a moment by a vision of the two writhing in bed. Later, Bhatia told him that my wife hasn't been well was Mohan's euphemism for the early weeks of pregnancy. Gandhi finds it embarrassing, to say that his wife is pregnant because he thinks it's as good as saying we've been fucking. They chatted desultorily and smelt pakoras frying. Mohan displayed none of Bhatia's rancor against the universe. He seemed not happy, but reasonably at peace, satisfied with his lot. A room in Madna, a bathroom that he shared with a colleague, a sexy and patient wife cook, a surly servant, low voltage. The tube light works well only after 11 or so, 1800 a month. In a few weeks, a posting to some black hole called Pirtana. I'm hoping electricity gets there before we do. A healthy body, but a mere well of blood for 1,000,000 mosquitoes. A love for Sarat Chandra in translation. Agastya. Agastya is a nice name. You must have read the original in Bengali. But I really loved a book of his called The Man Without Character, and a future that would be a predictable extension of the present. I haven't seen any translations of Sarat Chandra in English. But you haven't seen many things, Agastya reminded himself humbly. Yes, I found it in Uttarkashi, in the college library where I was teaching. A horrible translation in a horrible place. I've been Uttarkashi. We stopped there when we were on a college trek. Uttarkashi had been as dry as the skin of their guide. They had spent hours looking for illicit booze, curious yokels, and ugly dabas beside a silver-white Ganga. Agastya couldn't imagine teaching in an Uttarkashi college. No one could impart or imbibe wisdom there. Did you stay there long? 2 years I taught there. It was horrible. Mohan smiled shyly. The college was supposed to be a postgraduate level, but the labs weren't even worth intermediate. Everything broken or stolen. There were 2 old gundas claiming to be principal. Each had younger gundas or as bodyguards. I used to wonder which of them was drawing the principal's salary. When they met in the corridor, they used to curse each other quite colorfully, and most students would rush out of class to hear them. Even I learned a few new curses by listening to them. Mohan turned in his chair a little to ensure that his wife was out of earshot. Once, one called the other, "You cock of a diseased rat." Another time, one of them said, "Your mother uses her turds as a dildo." The rival principals of a college, remember. Actually, to be fair to Uttarkashi, the college wasn't worse than many other colleges elsewhere. For instance, it could easily be mistaken for a college in Alwar. They laughed. The servants served tea surlily. Rohini joined them finally, shy and sexy. "These mithais are from the local shop here," said Mohan, "but you'd think they were made in Calcutta." "Isn't that Gopalan?" asked Bhatia. "I think he's coming this way." Rohini scurried in to plead with the servant to arrange for another chair. They all got up as Gopalan came up. He was a divisional forest officer and Bhatia's boss. Bhatia introduced Agastya. "Hello," said Gopalan. "It's good to see another bearded government servant." They laughed. He seemed a pleasant, informal man and joined them without any excessive fuss. "We're planning a picnic next Sunday to Gorapak. Shrivastaf Saab and Kumar Saab have said yes. The wives are going to relax and the husbands are going to cook. I wanted to call Sati also, but Shrif stuffs up negatived quite vehemently. He wants only officers and their families. You'll come, of course, then?